Parshat VaYikra. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Parshat VaYikra. Yeah, this is the beginning of the book of VaYikra, of the same name. Absolutely. VaYikra, the very first word of this parsha. And as is always, the parsha is named after either the first word or one of the first words in the parsha. And so, here we go. I'm going to be leaning into a teaching from Ma'or Eynaim. Ma'or Eynaim is a series of teachings on the parsha from Menachem of Chernobyl, who lived between 1763 and 1797, and yes, that very same Chernobyl. And Ma'or Eynaim, Menachem, is going to be riffing on the very first line of our parsha, which is the following. VaYikra el Moshe, VaYidaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. VaYikra, and called to Moshe. Okay, so it is referring to someone or something or some entity that calls to Moshe. We can only assume that it's speaking about God, Yud He Vav He, which is why it's in parentheses there, but it's not explicit. So Moshe hears a call, and then Yud He Vav He speaks to him, Vayedaber Adonai elav, from the tent of meeting or the tent of appointment, saying. Now, we're not going to go into what God says to Moshe, except we do know that it's going to go into all of the sacrifices and how the sacrificial system is going to work, right? With all of the different offerings involved and what time of day to do it. This is a continuation of all the mitzvot, all of the commandments that were given at the end of the book of Shemot. So we begin with this line, and we're going to beautifully see how the Ma'or Eynaim, in the spirit of Hasidic commentary, takes this in a completely surprising direction. Let's go. Recognize this line? And who shall I say is calling? Maybe it's from this that Leonard Cohen got his inspiration. VaYikra el Moshe, who shall I say is calling? So we have, without vowels, the text from the Ma'or Eynaim, but I'm going to read it for you, and I'm going to translate it for you as well. Some of the translation will appear on your screen, and some of it I will give it to you as I read. V'hine. So what's it referring to? It's referring to that line, VaYikra el Moshe. V'hine ha'inyan hu she'Hashem yitbarach hotzienu miMitzrayim. So the subject is that Hashem Yitbarach, the Holy One, blessed be, he, brought us out of Egypt, right? Hotzianu miMitzrayim. Now I underlined that. Why? Because I said this is going to be a little bit of a foretaste, a Vorspeise of Pesach. Ilu hotzianu, right? V'natan lanu. There's a little bit more. Natan lanu what? And we're about to find that. Tekef mitzvot Pesach u'milah. Tekef, Immediately God gave us the commandments, the mitzvot of Pesach, u'milah, and circumcision. Of Pesach and of circumcision. You can breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't give you a different image. Continuing. V'achar kach. Now this is going to be an important phrase. Everybody say it together. Achar kach. Again. Achar kach. Judith, say it. Achar kach. There we go. V'achar kach. This is going to keep coming up again and again and again. V'achar kach. And after this, after the giving of Pesach and Milah, the mitzvot, kara lanu et hayam. Whoosh. God split the sea for us. So we are going in order here of the things that have already happened in our Torah readings. But what happens next? Va'achar kach, everybody. Va'achar kach. Holichenu b'midbar va'amud anan yomam va'amud eish laila. And then God brought us into the wilderness under a pillar of cloud by day, yom, and a pillar of fire, eish, by night, laila. Whew. And there they are. Makes a lot of sense, since we would need to be protected from the heat of the day, that there be a cloud to protect us. Continuing with the teaching of the Ma'or Eynaim. Whoa, surprise, as Gomer Pyle would say, surprise, surprise, surprise. Va'achar kach, natan lanu et haTorah, natan lanu et haTorah. Dayenu. But would it really be Dayenu? Would it really be enough? That is up for conversation. But here is the giving of Torah. I use this image because I love the fact that the artist, well, love might be going far out of my way, that the artist renders the karnayim or, the sparks of life, the rays of light emanating from Moshe's head. When he comes down, he's so full of light from his being in tete-a-tete with Hashem for 40 days and 40 nights that he's filled with that light. Guess what that has been misinterpreted as throughout the centuries? That Jews have horns, which, by the way, is a great recording and the best name for a CD ever by the Klezmatics. Guess what the next thing is going to say? Va'achar kach, you got it. Tziva la'asot mishkan ka'amor v'yasu li mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham. After that, we were given the mitzvah to build a sanctuary, as it says, Asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Build me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. But of course, the Hasidic masters understand this to mean that we are building a sanctuary within ourselves. That this is our lifetime task, to build upon the light that is given to us from within and from without. Okay, so where am I going with this? I think I've already mentioned all of these things, one thing at a time, would be enough. Dayenu, 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 which of course means it's sufficient. The word die is a word when my boys were teenagers and they were really on each other's cases, one would yell at each other, die, die, enough, right? So it's a good word to know. Enough, must speak. Now here's the rest of the teaching. Is the whole thing showing there, Devorah-esque? Or do I need to move it over a little bit? Okay, here we go. Okay, I want you to see it all. There we go. Whoop. Ah. Oh, I see what's going on. I don't want to change it then. So here's the rest of the Ma'or Eynaim's teaching. First of all, he draws upon a metaphor. Kamashal. A mashal is a metaphor, sometimes in the forms of a story. This is like a person in his entire life who lived in darkness. This is going to sound familiar to you, and had not seen the light of day. If hayu motzi'in oto pitom la'avir ha'olam, if suddenly he had been brought out into the light of the world, lo haya yachol lisbol ha'or, he wouldn't be able to suffer, wouldn't be able to hold onto the power of all of that light all at once. L'chein tzarich laharot lo b'hadraga. Shematchila sin lo sedek katan. So in other words, one needs a little bit at a time, step by step, inch by inch, right? To begin to bring that person with a little bit at a time. Sheachol lirot misham ma'at or, so that he's able to see a little bit of light at a time. Va'achar kach marchivin lo hasedek ad shenasa chalon. Afterwards, expanded. Things grow a little bit wider in his ability to see, right? The kind of like if you look up in the sun directly and then all of a sudden you're blinded, but the things begin to come into focus, right? As time goes on, kind of like a window opening a little bit wider and wider. And afterwards, he's brought into the light entirely. So he likens us to the 50 steps of defilement that we experienced in Egypt. We descended into the worst of the worst. And so when we were brought out, what needed to happen? If we were brought out from Egypt and given everything at all at once, here, take it, we wouldn't be able to. It would be too much to bear. We wouldn't be able to walk up that entire ladder in one great leap. VaYikra VaYikra hatachlit haya v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. So the most important here is to know that this is the beginning, ways in which we build our inner Mishkan, step by step, a little light at a time. For each step is a Dayenu moment. And now I would like to share, as we head to breakthrough rooms, I would like to share a little bit of my step-by-step journey with you. Each of these steps is a much, much longer story. I have been so blessed along the way, and I have also had my share of challenges and grief, as we all do, for the price of living in this world. Of course, this was based upon the allegory of the cave, the little bit of light at a time. So all preceding Torah has led us to this point at the beginning of VaYikra, which provides us with rituals and instructions with accompanying sacrifices through which to answer Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's call in the wilderness. Our Torah cycle has led up to this moment, and so too, my friends, all of our life stories lead us to this moment and there to prepare us to answer when we are called. The earliest thing I want to bring you to and share with you is my experience as a choir boy in New York. When I sang with the Samuel Sterner Concert Choir, 10 days after I started singing with the choir, I sang a solo on the stage of Madison Square Garden. And we wore these absolutely inane robes. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see the arrow that lead to me as a boy. It looks like the choir leader is about to punch me in the nose. But as I always like to say, he used to yell at us, and I would cry because I was a very sensitive boy. So he knew better than to yell at me. But this was a tremendous experience I had of singing in a professional men's choir, which also at times included women, as you see here in this picture. And I got to eat the good food at Grossinger's and Kutcher's in the meantime. One of the times, driving to Grossinger's, my father gave a lift to a man who was singing with the choir during that high holiday season. He wasn't even Jewish. And yet the choir leader would hire non-Jews who were good readers. And he had heard me sing many times, and he asked from the back of the car, "Have you ever thought of getting Mark into show business?" And the resounding silence from my parents in the front of the car was a no. But this was during Pesach, and the following Rosh Hashanah, right before Rosh Hashanah, we got a call from this man, Tony Gardell, who had set up an interview with me for an agent. And we went down to the city, and I sang for this agent, and then we marched over to the Schubert Theater where I auditioned and won a role in Oliver in the Broadway production. Now, this was a fantastic experience. It was not easy for me to go from school to rehearsals, to be taken out of school eventually, and out of public school to go to private school. Everybody was learning French, and I refused to do that because I was not going to be in that school for very long. And then we went on the road, and we had to fill out our homework while we were in the dressing room during our breaks. So this obviously was my resume that was put together during that time. And I continued acting through high school. You see that hair on the right? That's me. And underneath it, it says Zag. And it says hair today, gone tomorrow, because I had just auditioned for the reprise of the Broadway musical Hair, which I did not get cast for. And that was a major lesson in my life. You know, sometimes it's good to prepare for your audition. But on the left, you'll see a picture of me playing Nathan Detroit in the high school production of Guys and Dolls. And underneath that wig was all that hair that you see on that right. And when I took a bow during the curtain call, I threw my wig off and shook my hair out because everybody was wondering if the teacher director had forced me to get a haircut. Now, I'm going to skip over high school, and I'm going to skip through college because all of my college experience remains a haze. But when I was in college, working on my master's, I lived in New York, in the city, and I would stay in contact with the theater world. And one time I picked up an issue of Show Business magazine, and in there I said to my girlfriend at the time, who eventually became my wife at the time, there's an audition notice, and they're looking for me. They were looking for a musician to work with this theater company, the Living Stage Theater Company. Now, I'm going to read this out loud because I can trace my life as an Eved Hashem, as a servant of God, all the way back to my experience with this theater company. In the deepest part of our soul, in the truest part of our humanity, we have the need to create, to transform the viciousness and mediocrity of the world into sunshine and peace. Welcome to this place where you can dare to be in your dreams, dare to be strong, dare to be vulnerable. All power to the imagination. I went to Washington twice to audition for this theater company. I thought these people were nuts. I won the job, I came to Washington, and my life was changed forever. During that period of time, I left the theater company because I realized eventually that I knew more about the population who we served in the Washington, D.C. area, which is mostly in D.C., an African-American one, than I knew about my own Jewish roots. And this was awakened by some Jewish singers, artists, and musicians who I fell into. But during this time, my two sons were born, Zach on the bottom, on the left, and Aaron on the right. Then you see them in the IDF on the right and on the left, Aaron on the right and Zach on the left. And it was during the time when they were young, between 86 and 87, that this marriage ended. And I descended into the deepest grief and through the deepest darkness I have ever experienced in my life, and was not sure how I was going to get out of it. But somehow, angels came into my life. One in the form of Rabbi Leonard Kahan of blessed memory, who gave me an opportunity to daven high holiday services. Now, I haven't mentioned anything about coming back to my Yiddishkeit, but that happened. It happened through these two musicians, especially Robin Helsner on the lower left and Rabbi David Schneier, who many of you know, who received eventually smicha from Reb Zalman of blessed memory. And they awakened or reawakened in the music that I had been introduced to as a child and brought out in me my yearning to reattach to my roots. But I also, during this time, I separated and we got divorced, and I needed to earn a living, which you may not know that when you work in theater, you can actually discover that you can actually make less money if you start working freelance. Not a good thing if you're trying to support a family, but many amazing things happened during this time when I was trying to breathe and I was trying to listen. How do I make my way in this world? Well, I wrote and performed a play, Heroes, at the Smithsonian and Wolf Trap and in schools in Virginia and Maryland. I had to make a living somehow, so I became a fundraiser for the Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy. And luckily, I did my job so well that I got health insurance through them. That was a machaya. I received a grant to teach writing in schools by the Virginia Commission of the Arts. Did I know how to do that? No, but I told people I could. And so I made it up as I went along. I taught playwriting for Center Stage in Baltimore. Did I know how to do that before I was given the opportunity? No, but I learned what I needed to learn. And just as any rabbi would tell you, you just have to know a little bit more than the people that you're teaching in order to serve those people well. And then finally, as I've mentioned, I came back with Jewish music with Robin Helsner and David Schneier. Renee and I met in 1991. I was working with other bands in the area. And I faced the problem when people used to come up to me and ask, can I have your card? Well, I couldn't give people my card because it wasn't my band. And so Renee, she said to me, no, start your own band, which I did, which for the next 30 years became a major part of my parnassah. So Renee was an angel in my life, and you might recognize this angel by the name of Dee Herman. For Dee had just returned from DLTI, the 4th week, and we were doing a cancer residency at Washington Hospital Center. I didn't know Dee, but she told me all about DLTI. I said, this sounds interesting. And I was studying and trying to find my way in my life. And so all of that, I went to DLTA. And years later, I realized that, oh my gosh, all these people in DLTI, they're in one of the AOP programs, in the ordination programs. And I look at Renee and I say, should I do it? And she says the most beautiful and wonderful advice I've ever given in my life. When I said to her, I'll be 60 years old when I graduate. And she said, well, you might as well be 60 and a rabbi. All of which came to fruition. Finally, you know what transpired. More angels in my life. Reb Zalman. And then, of course, you! All of you! Angels in my life who have brought me to this moment. What a mechaya. What a gift indeed.